Hello, welcome to another episode of Pint Time with Backpacker Mike. Today's episode 242. We're going to be talking about the American history that most people get wrong. That's right. And I'm going to be trying this. Actually, it is a Japanese style rice lager by Dream State Brewing, and it's got a really cool label there. Really awesome. Got the koi fish. And there we go, Dream State Brewing. So I'm going to give this one a try. It comes in at 4.7%. So let's give this a try before we go on with the show. Again, we're going to be talking about some American history that most people get wrong. It smells like a really good lager on the nose. Again, this is made out of rice. It's a rice lager. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Anyway, all right, let's give this one a try. Here we go. Cheers, pro, sláinte, and skål for my Nordic friends. You know who you are. Oh, yeah, that's a really nice, crisp, Japanese style rice lager. Let me do a hard pour for you guys so you can kind of see how it looks there. There you go. A little hazy. Looks like it's got some bits in there, too. Yeah, it's really good. It's got a subtle bitterness at the end, but it's very nice, crisp, light, refreshing. I'm going to give Dream State Brewing Company. Where are they out of? By Dream State. Oh, they're out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Dream State. Cool. They're out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm going to give them an 8.5. Actually, 8.5. That's a really good rice lager there. All right, I'll put this. All right, now let's get into the show here real quick. This will be a real quick live. I just wanted to talk about some American history that most people get wrong. Some of these I actually was taught completely different when I was in school. So I thought it would be kind of interesting to share with not only Americans, but also other people from around the world for sure. So the first one I want to talk about is, what city was the first capital of the United States? Some people say Washington, D.C., and that is actually wrong. It was rather New York City. New York City was where George Washington made his first inaugural address on April 30th, 1789. Washington and New York City, however, weren't alone when it comes to being the capital of the United States. Other cities have shared the honor, like Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Baltimore, Maryland, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, for only 24 hours. It was probably around the War of 1812 when they burned the White House down. York, Pennsylvania, Princeton, New Jersey, and Annapolis, Maryland, and Trenton, New Jersey all served as the capital of the United States throughout our history. Pretty crazy. This one, a lot of people are starting to wake up to, and they realize, that this wasn't really true. But that is, who first discovered America? I mean, aside from the indigenous people that were already here, but as far as Europeans coming over, who was the first to discover it? It definitely was not Christopher Columbus. It was actually Leif Erikson, the Viking who discovered North America. Actually, he landed up near Nova Scotia. But most states have changed the holiday now from Columbus Day, because we celebrate that here in the States. Most states have changed that to Indigenous Peoples Day now, that is celebrated. But Columbus actually made landfall in 1492 on an island in the Bahamas. Now, what specific island he landed on has not been determined. Based off of memoirs and everything else, nobody can determine exactly what island. But over his next three voyages, he actually stopped in various locations throughout the Caribbean and South America, including Cuba, Hispaniola, and the Paria Peninsula, or modern-day Venezuela or Venezuela. And he established a colony in modern-day Haiti, but never in the United States. So Christopher Columbus never reached North America and the United States. The other one, history about America that people get wrong is when was the Declaration of Independence signed? Now, we here in the United States celebrate our independence from the English Empire uh, on July 4th, obviously. So, but it is not July 4th, 1776, but rather August 2nd, 1776 was when the Declaration of Independence was signed. Basically, while the Second Continental Congress initially met in Philadelphia to discuss the country's future on July 1st, 1776, and declared independence from England on July 2nd, 1776. The final draft wasn't until July 4th, and it wasn't actually signed by all the members of the Continental Congress until August 2nd, which I believe John Hancock was the very last representative of the Continental Congress to sign the Declaration of Independence. So we celebrate the day that the final draft was completed and not the day that all of the signatures of the colonies representatives were on the Declaration. So there you have it. So if you want to celebrate Independence Day on July 4th and August 2nd, by all means, go right ahead. All right, this is another misnomer that people get wrong when it comes to history of the United States, and that is, where did the Pilgrims land in America? Nobody really knows, actually, but it was not Plymouth Rock. Actually, the exact spot is unknown where they landed. They know it was in and around Plymouth, but they don't know the exact spot. And actually, where exactly is unknown. So the only reason that we think Plymouth Rock was the spot was because 121 years after their arrival, a young boy overheard a 95-year-old man named Thomas Faunce, who related that his father, who came to Plymouth 3 years after the Mayflower, told him he'd heard from an unnamed person that the landing occurred there. And thus they landed on Plymouth Rock. The English Puritan, also the English Puritan William Bradford, who was sort of in charge of that colony, failed to mention Plymouth Rock in any of his memoirs or books about the Plymouth plantation. So the guy who was the lead person in that colony didn't even mention Plymouth Rock in his memoirs or his book. So there you go. All right, another one that we Americans tend to get wrong, and that is, what did Paul Revere shout out at his midnight ride in 1775? It was not the British are coming. Why? Because British wasn't even a term used then. It was probably the regulators, or the regulars, sorry, but it wasn't the British. The correct answer is probably the regulars, which would be the regular British Army, or nothing. Most historians actually say that he said nothing on his ride because it was a covert mission. Also, back then, like I said, the term British was not used. And if he was yelling, the British were coming, it would have brought a lot of attention to his covert operation. And not only that, people wouldn't have known what he was talking about. So it's more likely he said the regulars are coming only one time, and that was when he arrived at the house of Sam Adams and John Hancock, who were fugitives from the crown at the time for signing the Declaration of Independence. There you have it. Or wanting to sign or putting together a Declaration of Independence. All right, the next one was kind of different for me because I was always taught this way. The Nina, the Santa, the Nina, Santa Maria, all the ships that supposedly Columbus had. But what were the names of Columbus's ships? Well, it wasn't the Nina or the Pinta or the Santa Maria. There you go. But rather the Santa Maria, the Santa Clara, and the third ship is unknown. Hello. And the third ship is unknown. So the crew actually called the Santa Maria the La Gallega, and that was after the province where the ship was built, which was in Galicia, Spain, which I've been to, Galicia, Spain. Also, the second ship, Santa Clara, was nicknamed Nina, because due to the fact that it was owned by a man named Juan Nino, and the female version of that would be Nina. And the third ship wasn't officially deemed the Pinta, but some sailors gave it the name Pinta because they were inspired by the Spanish term for the painted one or the prostitute, and the ship's original name has been lost to history. So Pinta was just a nickname that the sailors on the ship gave it because it was pretty or it was painted or whatever. So there's another one. All right, the next one on the list is who paid for the Statue of Liberty? Who paid for the Statue of Liberty? Well, it wasn't all France. It was actually both France and New York, the state of New York. France was responsible for the iconic statue and the building of the statue. However, New York at the last minute had to gather enough money together to construct the large granite slab that Lady Liberty is attached to. They almost didn't come up with the money. And there were other cities like Boston and Philadelphia who had the funds available, and they attempted to get the statue. So could you imagine if the statue wasn't in New York, but rather it was in Boston or it was in Philadelphia? That would be interesting. I guess we wouldn't know any better though, to be honest. So, all right, another one is who invented the car? Now, a lot of people think it was Henry Ford, but it was not Henry Ford who actually invented the car. It was actually Carl Benz, the man behind Mercedes-Benz. Uh, he invented the first automobile in Germany in 1885. And by 1889, Benz was actually exhibiting his Model 3 commercial vehicle at the World's Fair in Paris. And Henry Ford's Model T didn't even hit the market until 1908. So it was actually, Carl Benz who ended up creating the car. So that was interesting. A lot of people here in the United States think it was Henry Ford. This one was a bit interesting for me because I always thought that it was Betsy Ross, but who created the original American flag? It was actually not Betsy Ross. I did not know that. Historians believe it was Francis Hopkinson. Betsy Ross was never credited with the creation of the flag at any point in her lifetime, and it wasn't until nearly a century later in 1870 and 20 years after her death that William J. Canby presented a paper on the matter to the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, and Ross was established as an American legend. But the sneaky thing is that Canby was actually Betsy Ross's grandson. So historians aren't 100% sure Ross deserves credit for that. Some historians believe it was actually Francis Hopkinson, a member of the Continental Congress actually at the time, namely because he made a claim to it in his memoirs and when he was still alive. And according to his account, the only thing he wanted for payment for creating the flag was a quarter cask of wine, of which he never received. So pretty interesting. All right, the next one on the list is the Salem witch trials. Now, everybody thinks, including myself, thought that the witches were burned at the stake during the Salem witch trials, but they actually weren't. They either died by hanging, like the 19 people who were hung from the gallows on Gallow Hill, or in the case of Gilles Corey, were pressed to death with large stones. Ouch. This was the only recorded death by pressing in U.S. history. It's basically where they pull up big heavy stones and then they just lower them down on you until it just crushes to death. It's kind of crazy. This is one that some people don't know as well, and that is who was the first president of the United States? Most people say, oh, it was George Washington, but that is actually incorrect. George Washington was the first elected president of the United States, but the first president of the United States was actually Peyton Randolph. Washington was the country's first elected president, as I said. He, during the Revolution in 1775, Peyton Randolph was the first um, was the first and third president appointed by the Continental Congress. And in 1783, Thomas Mifflin, an aide to Washington, General Washington at the time, during the war, served as president and ratified the Treaty of Paris, which is the treaty that was signed between the U.S. Or the colonies at the time and England. That was the final end of the Revolutionary War and the beginning of our country. And it was actually an appointed president by the Continental Congress who signed that. But John Hancock, however, holds the distinction as serving the most time as president of the Continental Congress over two separate terms, the fourth and the 13th term, and he served more than 1,000 days in the role. So, to give you perspective, there were 13 other appointed presidents of the United States, and they were appointed by the Continental Congress. All right, and the last one I have for you guys is, have all the presidents lived in the White House? Some people think yes, they did, but actually they didn't. General Washington, President Washington, oversaw the construction of the White House beginning in 1792. It wasn't until our country's second president, John Adams, took office that the president could call it home in 1800. John Adams and his wife, Abigail, and their kids moved into the residence, the first White House. But it was short lived because 5 months later, Thomas Jefferson won the election for president, and the Adams had to leave the White House, and Thomas Jefferson moved in. So there you go. All right, that's all I got for you guys today. If you guys aren't following me on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, please give me a follow on either of those platforms. I would greatly appreciate it. And come back next Saturday, and I may have my friend John guest from England, live from England, and we will be talking about some countries that we traveled to together and our different perspectives of that. So look for that next Saturday, and I will see you guys later. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on Pint Time. Please share with your friends and family. I truly appreciate it. And as always, peace, love, and let's continue to experience this beautiful world together. I'll see you guys next time on Pint Time with Backpacking Life. Peace.